Only the maid's daughter dared speak to the billionaire's silent mother. But when her hands began to move, every whisper, every secret in the room stopped breathing. They say silence has a sound, if you listen closely enough. In the grand halls of the Blackwood estate, silence wasn't absence, it was power. No one dared disturb it. No one, except a 10-year-old girl with dust on her shoes and light in her hands. "Good evening," she signed. The woman who hadn't heard a voice in decades looked up, and the world stopped breathing. From that moment, nothing in the Blackwood family, or in their history, would ever sound the same again. This isn't just a story about wealth and silence. It's about a language that can't be heard, but can heal. A secret buried in bloodlines and time, awakened by the smallest act of kindness. And before I forget, where are you watching from today? Leave a comment below. We love seeing how far these stories reach. Enjoy the story. A single act of kindness can echo through a generation. The grand ballroom of the Blackwood estate was a sea of glittering jewels and hushed, important whispers. But 10-year-old Lily saw none of it. Her eyes were fixed on the dust bunnies hiding beneath a velvet curtain, a silent rebellion against the perfect, polished world she was paid to ignore. The air in the Blackwood mansion was different. It wasn't just the temperature, perfectly controlled to a crisp 72 degrees, or the faint scent of lemon polish and old money. It was the silence. A heavy, expensive silence that clung to the marble floors and high, vaulted ceilings. Lily, with her sunshine blonde hair tied back in a simple ponytail, felt it most. At 10 years old, she was a connoisseur of silences. There was the comfortable silence she shared with her mother, Sarah, on the bus ride home, their shoulders gently bumping with the rhythm of the road. There was the tense silence of an empty pantry the week before payday. And then there was this, the Blackwood silence. A silence that wasn't empty, but full of things unsaid. "Lily, stay close," her mother whispered, her voice a tiny thread in the vast tapestry of the ballroom. Sarah's uniform was a stark, simple black against the vibrant colors of the guests' gowns. Her hands, though, were what Lily always noticed. Red and raw from cleaning, but always gentle. Always there to smooth Lily's hair or straighten her collar. Tonight was the annual Blackwood Foundation Gala, a night when the city's wealthiest gathered to congratulate themselves on their generosity. For Sarah, it meant double the work. For Lily, it meant an evening of staying invisible, a ghost in the background of a fairy tale she wasn't part of. She was only here because Mrs. Gable, the regular babysitter, had the flu. Lily was good at being invisible. She had learned to walk without making a sound, to observe without being seen. It was a skill honed by years of living in the margins of other people's lives. From her discreet corner near the orchestra, Lily watched the parade of guests. They were like birds of paradise, preening and posing, their laughter like the clinking of champagne glasses. They all flocked around Mr. Michael Blackwood, the man who owned this palace, this city, this very air they breathed. He was tall and handsome, with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. His eyes, a cool, calculating gray, swept the room, assessing, always assessing. But it was his mother, Eleanor Blackwood, who held Lily's attention. She sat in a plush armchair near the roaring fireplace, a solitary island in the swirling sea of the party. Her silver hair was coiled in an elegant knot, and a magnificent pearl necklace graced her throat. But her eyes, a startlingly bright blue, were distant. She watched the festivities with a polite, vacant smile, completely alone in a room full of people. No one spoke to her. They would nod in her direction, a gesture of respect to the family matriarch, but no one approached. No one engaged. Because Eleanor Blackwood was deaf. Lily had heard the staff whisper about it. A childhood illness had stolen her hearing decades ago. She lived in a world of silence, a silence far deeper and more profound than the one that filled her grand home. Lily's heart ached for her. It was a strange, sharp pang of empathy for a woman she had never met, a woman who lived in a world so different from her own. A commotion near the entrance drew Lily's attention. A server, a young man with nervous, darting eyes, had stumbled, sending a tray of canapes cascading onto the floor. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Mr. Blackwood's jaw tightened, a muscle flexing in his cheek. The young man turned beet red, stammering apologies as he scrambled to clean up the mess. "Get him out of here," Mr. Blackwood said, his voice low and cold. Two security guards materialized, and the server was escorted away, his career at Blackwood Manor likely over. The incident was over in a minute. The mess cleared, the smooth surface of the party restored. But the chill of Mr. Blackwood's dismissal lingered in the air. Lily looked back at Eleanor. The old woman hadn't turned, hadn't reacted. She had missed the entire drama. Her isolation was so complete, it was as if she were encased in glass. A beautiful, forgotten statue. Later, as the evening wore on, Lily saw her chance. Her mother was busy in the kitchen, overseeing the dessert service. Mr. Blackwood was engrossed in a conversation with the senator. Eleanor was still alone, her gaze now fixed on the flames dancing in the fireplace. Taking a deep breath, Lily slipped away from her corner. She walked purposefully, her small feet making no sound on the thick Persian rug. She stopped a respectful distance from Eleanor's chair. The old woman didn't notice her. Lily raised her hands. Her fingers, small and nimble, began to move. They danced in the air, forming shapes and symbols, weaving a silent language that was as beautiful and expressive as any spoken word. "Good evening," she signed. "The fire is beautiful, isn't it?" Eleanor's head snapped up. Her bright blue eyes, which had been so distant, so clouded, suddenly sharpened with focus. A look of stunned disbelief washed over her face. She stared at Lily, at her moving hands, as if seeing a ghost. Then, slowly, hesitantly, her own hands rose. They were stiff and used to this silent dance. But the movements were there, remembered from a lifetime ago. "You speak?" She signed, her fingers trembling slightly. Lily smiled, a warm, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Yes, I do." A low murmur began to ripple through the ballroom. The conversations, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, it all started to fade. One by one, the guests turned to stare. They saw the billionaire's deaf mother, the woman no one spoke to, engaged in a lively, animated conversation with a little girl in a simple blue dress. The maid's daughter. Mr. Blackwood's conversation with the senator faltered. He turned, his eyes following the gaze of his guests. When he saw his mother, her face alight with a joy he hadn't seen in years, his mask of cool composure finally cracked. He stared at Lily, his gray eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something else, something he couldn't quite name. The entire room had fallen silent. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the soft swish of a waiter's jacket. In that moment, the carefully constructed hierarchy of the Blackwood world was turned upside down. The most powerful people in the city were silent, their attention captivated by the most powerless person in the room, a 10-year-old girl who had dared to speak to the woman who lived in silence. Eleanor's hands moved with growing confidence, her face animated, her eyes sparkling. "It has been so long," she signed, a single tear tracing a path down her wrinkled cheek. "So very long since someone truly spoke to me." Lily's hands moved in response, her expression one of pure, unadulterated empathy. "Everyone deserves to be heard," she signed back. And in the gilded ballroom of the Blackwood estate, surrounded by a fortune so vast it was impossible to comprehend, that simple, profound truth, delivered by the hands of a maid's daughter, shocked the entire room. It was a truth more valuable than all the jewels and all the money in that room combined. And it was a truth that would change the course of all their lives forever. Michael Blackwood felt a strange sensation, a tightening in his chest he wasn't accustomed to. It was as if the world had tilted on its axis. He had spent his entire life building walls, controlling his environment, managing perceptions. He managed his company, his investments, his staff, even his own emotions with a ruthless efficiency. But he could not manage this. This small, blonde-haired girl had breached his defenses in a way no corporate rival ever had. She had walked into the heart of his carefully ordered world and created a moment of pure, unpredictable, and undeniable human connection. He watched his mother. The years seemed to melt away from her face. The polite, vacant mask she wore in public was gone, replaced by an unguarded, radiant joy. She was laughing, a silent, shoulder-shaking laugh that he hadn't seen since he was a boy, before his father's death had plunged the family into a different kind of silence. She was animated, her hands and face telling a story that he couldn't understand, but that he desperately wanted to. He started to walk towards them, a slow, deliberate pace. The crowd parted for him, a silent sea of curious faces. He felt their eyes on him, felt their questions hanging in the air. Who was this girl? Where did she come from? How did she know the silent language that had been a barrier between him and his mother for as long as he could remember? He had tried, of course. In the beginning, years ago, he had hired tutors, bought books. He had learned the basics, the polite phrases. Good morning. How are you? I love you. But he had never become fluent. He was a busy man, with a business empire to run. The stilted, clumsy conversations had frustrated him. It was easier, more efficient, to write notes, to rely on lip reading, to let the silence grow between them until it became a chasm. He had convinced himself it was enough. Now, watching this child converse with his mother with such effortless grace, he felt a profound and startling shame. He stopped a few feet away, not wanting to break the spell. Lily, sensing his presence, turned to look at him. Her eyes were a calm, clear blue, and she regarded him with a seriousness that was unnerving in a child. There was no fear in her gaze, no awe of the powerful man before her, just a quiet, steady appraisal. His mother saw him then. Her smile faltered for a moment, a flicker of the old sadness returning to her eyes. She signed something to Lily, a quick, questioning gesture. Lily turned back to Michael. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and soft, yet it carried across the silent room. Mrs. Blackwood says she is happy, the girl said simply. She says it's nice to talk about the garden. No one ever asks her about the garden. The garden. His mother's roses were legendary. She had spent decades cultivating them, pouring her love and her loneliness into the soil. He hadn't walked through that garden with her in over a decade. He sent a team of professional landscapers to maintain it, another act of efficient, detached care. Tell her, he started, his voice hoarse. He cleared his throat. Tell her I'm glad she's happy. Lily's small hands moved, translating his words. Eleanor watched her, then signed a response. She asks why you never learned to speak with your hands. Lily translated, her gaze unwavering. She says it is a beautiful language. The question was a direct hit, a gentle arrow that pierced through years of excuses and self-deception. It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple, honest question. And in the face of this child's unflinching gaze, he had no answer. No lie, no evasion, no business deal to distract him. Just the raw, uncomfortable truth. He hadn't made the time. He hadn't thought it was important enough. He stammered, feeling the unfamiliar heat of a blush creep up his neck. I was busy. The moment the words left his mouth, he knew how weak they sounded. Busy. He was always busy. Busy building a legacy for a family he barely spoke to. Busy accumulating a fortune for a son who would inherit a world of wealth, but a legacy of silence. Lily translated his pathetic excuse. Eleanor's expression was not one of anger or disappointment. It was one of understanding, a sad, maternal acceptance that was almost harder to bear. She signed something back, her movements slow and deliberate. She says she knows, Lily said, her voice soft. She says your father was a busy man, too. And there it was. The heart of it all. His father, a titan of industry, a man who had built the Blackwood Empire, had also been a man of few words. His presence had been a towering, formidable silence in their home. Michael had spent his life trying to emulate him, to live up to his legacy, to earn the approval of a man who was no longer there to give it. In doing so, he had become him. He had become a ghost in his own home, a stranger to his own mother. The silence in the room was finally broken by a tentative smattering of applause. It started with one person, then another, until the entire ballroom was filled with the sound. They weren't clapping for the billionaire or the success of his foundation. They were clapping for a moment of genuine, unscripted humanity. They were clapping for a little girl who had reminded them all of the simple, profound power of communication. Michael Blackwood looked at Lily, really looked at her, for the first time. She was not just the maid's daughter. She was a force of nature in a simple blue dress. She was a key that had unlocked a door in his heart he hadn't even known was closed. And he knew, with a certainty that shook him to his core, that this single, extraordinary evening was only the beginning. He needed to know more about this girl. He needed to understand how a 10-year-old child had mastered a language he had abandoned, how she had seen the loneliness in his mother that he himself had ignored. And a small, unsettling part of him suspected that the answers would be far more complex and surprising than he could possibly imagine. The party ended, as all parties do, The guests departed, their expensive cars purring into the night, leaving behind the scent of perfume and the lingering buzz of champagne. The staff began the quiet, efficient work of restoring order, of erasing any trace of the evening's festivities. But something had irrevocably shifted in the atmosphere of the Blackwood mansion. The silence was still there, but it felt different. Less heavy, more hopeful. Sarah found Lily by the fireplace, helping one of the housekeepers gather stray glasses. "There you are," she said, her voice a mixture of relief and anxiety. "Lily, what was all that? Everyone is talking." "I was just talking to Mrs. Blackwood," Lily said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "But how?" The hand talking. Sarah struggled for the words, her brow furrowed in confusion. "It's called American Sign Language, Mom," Lily corrected gently. "I learned it from a book." Sarah stared at her daughter. "A book?" Of course. Lily was always reading. While other kids were playing with dolls or video games, Lily was devouring books on everything from astrophysics to ancient history. She had a mind like a sponge, a bottomless curiosity that Sarah, with her high school education and double shifts, could barely keep up with. But this was different. This wasn't just knowledge. This was wisdom. This was empathy. "We should go," Sarah said, pulling her daughter close. "It's late." She was proud, so fiercely, achingly proud. But she was also afraid. The world of the Blackwoods was a dangerous one. They were not like other people. They had the power to create and to destroy, to lift people up and to cast them aside without a second thought. She had seen it happen, and she didn't want her brilliant, special daughter to become a curiosity, a plaything for the rich. As they were heading towards the service entrance, a voice stopped them. "Mrs. Martinez." A moment. It was Michael Blackwood. He stood in the arched doorway that led to the main hall, his tuxedo jacket now unbuttoned, his tie slightly loosened. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp, focused. "Mr. Blackwood, sir," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. She instinctively pushed Lily behind her, a protective maternal gesture. "I'm so sorry if she was a bother." She was supposed to stay out of the way. A bother. Michael's lips curved into a wry smile. "On the contrary, your daughter was the most interesting person at the party." He looked past Sarah to Lily, his gaze direct and serious. "Where did you learn to do that?" Lily peeked out from behind her mother. "The library," she said. "The library," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "And why?" Lily paused, considering the question. "Because she looked lonely," she said finally. "It's not good to be lonely." The simple, profound honesty of her answer seemed to land a physical blow. Michael was silent for a long moment, his carefully constructed world rearranging itself around this new, unexpected truth. He had wealth, power, influence. He could buy anything he wanted, command anyone he chose. But he had forgotten the simple, fundamental human need to not be lonely. A 10-year-old girl had just taught him a lesson he hadn't even known he needed to learn. "I would like to hire your daughter," he said, the words sudden and decisive. Sarah's eyes widened in alarm. "Hire her?" "Sir, she's a child. She needs to go to school." "Not to work," he clarified quickly. "To be a companion. For my mother. An hour or two after school. She would be a tutor, a conversation partner." He looked at Sarah, his gaze softening. "I will pay you, of course. Handsomely. Enough that you will not have to work double shifts anymore. Enough that you can be home with your daughter when she gets home from school." Sarah was stunned into silence. It was an offer that could change their lives. A way out of the constant struggle, the month-to-month desperation. But it meant letting her daughter deeper into this world, a world that glittered on the surface but had a cold, hard darkness underneath. I don't know," she stammered. "Please," Michael said, and the word, coming from this powerful, commanding man, was so unexpected, so stripped of artifice, that it was more compelling than any order. "Your daughter gave my mother a gift tonight that I have been unable to give her for 30 years. She made her happy." He looked down at Lily, a genuine, unforced smile finally reaching his eyes. "I have a feeling she has a lot more to teach us." And so it was decided. Lily, the maid's daughter, became the companion to the billionaire's deaf mother. It was a strange, unprecedented arrangement, the talk of the town for weeks. But in the quiet, sun-drenched rooms of the Blackwood mansion, away from the prying eyes and gossiping tongues of the outside world, something remarkable began to happen. A friendship blossomed, A bridge was built across a chasm of silence, and a little girl with an old soul began to unlock the secrets that had been hidden in the heart of the Blackwood family for generations. And as she did, she would discover that she had a secret of her own, a legacy far more powerful and extraordinary than anyone could ever have imagined. The first few weeks of Lily's new job settled into a quiet, comfortable routine. Every day after school, a sleek black car, the same one that drove Mr. Blackwood to his towering office downtown, would be waiting for her. The driver, a kind man named Arthur with a gentle smile and impeccably white gloves, would open the door for her as if she were a visiting dignitary. At first, the kids at school would stare, their noses pressed against the classroom windows, whispering and pointing. But Lily, with her serene composure, paid them no mind. Her world was expanding in ways they couldn't possibly understand. She and Eleanor would spend their afternoons in the solarium, a vast, glass-walled room filled with exotic plants and the scent of damp earth and blooming orchids. It was Eleanor's favorite room, a vibrant, living world that she had cultivated as her silent sanctuary. Here, surrounded by life, they would talk for hours. Their conversations, a silent ballet of hands and expressions, were a universe unto themselves. Lily learned that Eleanor had grown up in the countryside, a wild, barefoot girl who loved climbing trees and knew the names of all the constellations. She had dreamed of being an astronomer, of charting the stars. But a fever at the age of 12 had stolen her hearing, and with it, her dreams. Her world had shrunk, becoming a place of muffled sounds and frustrating misunderstandings. She was sent to a special school, taught to read lips and speak, her voice a flat, hollow sound she herself could not hear. Sign language was discouraged then, seen as a crutch, a visible marker of her difference. So she had packed it away, along with her dreams of the stars. My husband, Robert, she signed one afternoon, her gaze distant, fixed on a bird of paradise with a fiery orange crest. He was a good man, a brilliant man, but he was loud. His voice, his presence, it filled every room. After I lost my hearing, he didn't know how to be quiet with me. The silence made him uncomfortable. Lily's hands moved gently, her expression full of a child's simple, profound wisdom. Quiet can be beautiful. You just have to know how to listen to it. Eleanor looked at her, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face. In all her 80 years, no one had ever said anything like that to her. People saw her deafness as a lack, an absence. This child saw it as a different way of being, a different language of the soul. Lily, in turn, opened up her own world to Eleanor. She told her about her mother, about their small, clean apartment that always smelled of laundry soap and cinnamon. She described the plots of the books she was reading, her hands flying as she acted out the parts of brave knights and clever princesses and scientists who discovered new worlds. It was during one of these sessions that Lily's extraordinary knowledge first truly revealed itself. Eleanor had an old, leather-bound book on her lap, a collection of poetry. She pointed to a line, her brow furrowed. It was in Latin. Amor vincit omnia, she signed, her fingers spelling out the unfamiliar words. I remember my father used to say this. I never knew what it meant. Lily leaned over, her blonde ponytail brushing the page. She looked at the words for a moment, her blue eyes focused. Love conquers all, she signed without hesitation. Eleanor stared at her, her hands still. You know Latin? Lily simply nodded, as if it were no more surprising than knowing how to tie her shoes. I read it in a book at the library. She then proceeded to sign the next few lines of the poem, translating the complex, ancient verse into flawless, graceful American Sign Language. Eleanor watched, mesmerized. It wasn't just that she knew the words, it was the way she understood their rhythm, their meaning, their soul. It was a level of comprehension that went far beyond simple memorization. The child was a prodigy, but it was more than that. There was a depth to her, an oldness in her eyes that was both startling and comforting. Meanwhile, Michael Blackwood was a man in flux. He started leaving his office an hour early, a move that sent ripples of shock through his company. He would arrive home not to the heavy silence of the grand foyer, but to the sight of his mother and Lily in the solarium, their hands moving in a silent, animated conversation, their faces full of light. He didn't interrupt. He would stand in the doorway and watch, a strange ache in his chest. It was a mixture of joy for his mother's newfound happiness and a profound, personal regret for all the years he had missed, all the conversations they had never had. One evening, he found a beginner's guide to American Sign Language on his bedside table. There was no note. He knew, somehow, it had been left by one of the housekeepers, a quiet act of encouragement. He picked it up, the glossy pages cool beneath his fingers. That night, for the first time in 30 years, Michael Blackwood began to learn his mother's language. It was hard. His fingers felt clumsy, his mind slow. He practiced in the privacy of his study, the letters and words feeling foreign and awkward. He stumbled through the alphabet, his hands cramping. But he didn't give up. For the first time in his life, he was doing something that wasn't about business or profit or legacy. It was about connection. It was about love. A week later, he walked into the solarium. Lily and Eleanor looked up, surprised. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding like a nervous schoolboy's. He raised his hands, his movements stiff and uncertain. Good, he fumbled with the sign. Afternoon, Mother. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She brought her hands to her face, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Lily watched, her expression unreadable. She then stood up, walked over to Michael, and gently took his hand. She repositioned his thumb, corrected the curve of his fingers, showing him the proper form. You're doing great, she signed to him, a small, encouraging smile on her face. Then she turned to Eleanor. He's trying. That evening, for the first time in decades, the three of them had dinner together. The conversation was slow, halting, punctuated by Michael's clumsy attempts at signing and Lily's patient translations. But it was a conversation. The heavy, expensive silence of the Blackwood mansion was filled with the quiet, beautiful language of effort, of forgiveness, of a family slowly, tentatively, finding its way back to each other. The changes in the Blackwood household did not go unnoticed. The staff, who had worked for years under a cloud of unspoken sadness, felt a lightness in the air. There was laughter now, quiet at first, then more frequent. The oppressive silence was receding, like a long, dark tide. But not everyone was pleased. Michael's fiancée, a woman named Isabella Vance, watched these developments with a cool, appraising eye. Isabella was a woman who fit perfectly into Michael's old life. She was beautiful, intelligent, from a family of equal wealth and social standing. Theirs was a match that made perfect sense on paper, a merger of two powerful dynasties. But it was a relationship built on shared ambitions, not shared affections. Isabella saw Lily not as a sweet child, but as a disruption, an unpredictable variable in a world she liked to control. It's sweet, Michael, really, she said one evening, swirling a glass of red wine as they sat in the formal living room. But don't you think it's a little strange? Your mother has the best care money can buy. Why does she need this charity case to keep her company? She's not a charity case, Isabella, Michael said, his voice sharp. And she's not just keeping her company. She's teaching us. She's teaching me. Teaching you what? Isabella scoffed. How to wave your hands around. Michael, be serious. You have a multi-billion-dollar company to run. You don't have time for these little sentimental projects. Maybe I've been making time for the wrong things, he said, his gaze distant. The words hung in the air between them, a clear and undeniable challenge to the life they had planned together. Isabella saw the shift in him, the ground moving beneath her feet, and she did not like it. The conflict came to a head a few weeks later. The Blackwood family kept a private study, a room that was more like a museum, filled with artifacts and heirlooms from generations past. It was Robert Blackwood's old sanctuary, and Michael had kept it exactly as his father had left it. On a high shelf, in a glass case, was a collection of military medals, including a Medal of Honor. They had belonged to Michael's grandfather, General James Blackwood, a legendary hero from World War II. One afternoon, Lily and Eleanor were looking at old family photo albums. Eleanor pointed to a picture of a handsome, square-jawed man in a crisp uniform. My father, she signed. James. He was a great man. A hero. Lily looked at the photograph, her head tilted. Then she looked towards the study. Are his medals in there? Eleanor nodded, a shadow of sadness crossing her face. Michael keeps the room locked. He says it's to preserve things. But I think the memories are too heavy for him. Later that day, Lily was wandering the halls while Eleanor rested. She found herself standing before the heavy oak door of the study. It was, as Eleanor had said, locked. But Lily noticed something. A small, almost invisible key was tucked away on the top of the doorframe. It was a gesture of a son who wanted to keep the world out, but couldn't quite bring himself to throw away the key. Her curiosity piqued. Lily took the key, unlocked the door, and slipped inside. The room was dark, the air thick with the smell of old paper and leather. Sunlight struggled through the heavy velvet curtains. And there, on the wall, was the glass case. She stood on her tiptoes, her fingers tracing the glass over the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest award for valor. She wasn't just looking at the medal. She was reading it. Her eyes scanned the inscription, her expression one of intense concentration. It was as if she were absorbing not just the words, but the history, the sacrifice, the very essence of the man who had earned it. "What are you doing in here?" The voice was sharp, cold. Lily spun around. Isabella was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, her face a mask of fury. "This room is private," Isabella snapped. "You have no right to be in here. You are the help. You need to learn your place." Lily didn't flinch. She simply looked at Isabella with her calm, unervingly perceptive eyes. "I was just looking," she said. "Looking at things that don't concern you." Isabella sneered. She strode into the room and grabbed Lily's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the child's skin. "You're just like your mother. A little gold digger, worming your way into this family." At that moment, Michael and Eleanor appeared in the doorway. Michael had heard Isabella's raised voice and had come to investigate, his mother trailing behind him, her face etched with concern. "Isabella, what is going on?" Michael demanded, his voice dangerously low. "I found her snooping," Isabella said, tightening her grip on Lily. "In your father's private study. This is what happens when you let stray dogs into the house, Michael. They forget their place." Michael's face hardened into a cold fury. He strode forward and gently but firmly removed Isabella's hand from Lily's arm. He knelt down, his eyes level with the child's. "Lily, are you all right?" Lily nodded, her gaze fixed on the display case. "That medal," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "The inscription. It's wrong." Everyone in the room froze. "What did you say?" Michael asked, bewildered. "The citation," Lily said, pointing. "It says the action took place at the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944. But General Blackwood wasn't in Belgium then. He was leading a covert operation in the Hurtgen Forest. He saved an entire battalion, but it was classified. It was never made public." Michael stared at her, dumbfounded. How could you possibly know that?" Isabella let out a shrill, incredulous laugh. "She's making it up. It's ridiculous. A 10-year-old girl who thinks she knows more than the U.S. Army." But Eleanor was staring at Lily, her eyes wide with a dawning recognition, a memory sparking in the depths of her mind. She remembered her father, years after the war, sitting in this very room, a glass of whiskey in his hand. She had been a young woman then. He had been telling her stories, his voice low, his eyes haunted. Stories he had never told anyone else. Stories about a dark, dense forest, about a lost battalion, about a secret that had to be kept to protect the lives of his men. Eleanor's hands began to move, her signs sharp and urgent. Michael, his own signing still clumsy, struggled to understand. He looked at Lily. "She says you're right," Lily translated, her gaze still fixed on the medal. "She says her father told her the same story. He said the official record was a cover. He said the truth was too important and too dangerous to be told." The room was silent, save for the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. He was looking at a child who knew a secret history of his own family, a secret that had been buried for over 70 years. It was impossible. It was illogical. And yet, as he looked from the conviction on Lily's face to the tearful confirmation in his mother's eyes, he knew, with a certainty that defied all reason, that it was true. Isabella stared at them, her mouth agape, her perfectly ordered world crumbling around her. She had tried to put Lily in her place, to expose her as a fraud. But in doing so, she had revealed something far more profound and unsettling. This was not just a clever child. This was not just the maid's daughter. This was something else entirely. And for the first time in her life, Isabella Vance was truly, deeply afraid. The girl's knowledge, so specific and so profound, was a key to a lock Michael hadn't even known existed. It was one thing for her to learn sign language from a book, to have an old soul's empathy. It was another thing entirely to know a classified piece of military history, a secret that had died with his grandfather and lived only in the fading memories of his mother. That night, after a tense and silent dinner during which Isabella excused herself with a feigned headache, Michael went to his study. Not his father's study, but his own, a modern, minimalist space of glass and steel. He opened his laptop and began to dig. He was a man who believed in data, in verifiable facts. He spent hours cross-referencing military records, declassified documents, and regimental histories. On the surface, the official story held. General James Blackwood was a hero of the Battle of the Bulge. The citation on his Medal of Honor was consistent across all public records. But Michael was a man who knew how to look beneath the surface. He used his resources, made a few quiet calls to contacts in Washington, men whose families owed favors to the Blackwoods. He asked them to look for anomalies, for sealed files, for anything related to his grandfather's service in the winter of 1944. Days turned into a week. An uneasy truce settled over the mansion. Isabella was cold and distant, watching Lily with a mixture of suspicion and fear. Lily, for her part, seemed unfazed. Her afternoons with Eleanor continued as they always had, a peaceful island in the midst of a silent, brewing storm. They spoke of flowers and stars, of childhood memories and future dreams, the secret of the Hurtgen forest left unspoken between them, a shared and sacred trust. One rainy evening, Michael received a call. It was his contact, a retired four-star general who now sat on the board of a defense contractor. Michael, the old general's voice was gravelly, cautious. You were right to ask. I had to pull a lot of strings, call in favors I was saving for my grandchildren. But I found something. Michael leaned forward, his knuckles white as he gripped his phone. What is it? It's a ghost file, sealed under a 75-year national security directive. The seal expired 2 years ago, but nobody ever bothered to open it. It's a mission report. Operation Winter Pine. Hurtgen Forest. November 1944. The general paused. It was a disaster. The whole battalion was cut off, surrounded. They were given up for dead. But your grandfather, he refused to abandon them. He took a small, volunteer unit behind enemy lines. No support, no communications. The official report says they were all lost. But they weren't, Michael said, his voice a hoarse whisper. No, they weren't. He got them out. Every last one of them. But in doing so, he uncovered something he wasn't supposed to see. Evidence that the battalion had been intentionally sacrificed by a superior officer for, well, the reasons are redacted. But it was a cover-up, a massive one. So they buried the whole thing. They created the story about the Battle of the Bulge, gave him the Medal of Honor to ensure his silence, and classified the truth for 3/4 of a century. Michael felt the air leave his lungs. It was true. All of it. He hung up the phone, his mind reeling. He walked out of his study and found Lily in the library, curled up in a large armchair, a thick book open on her lap. She looked up as he approached, her blue eyes calm and knowing. How? Michael asked, the single word encompassing 1,000 questions. How did you know, Lily? Lily closed her book, marking her page with a small, embroidered bookmark. My grandfather told me. Michael blinked. Your grandfather? Sarah's father. He knew Sarah's father was a retired construction worker living in Florida. Lily shook her head gently. No, my great-grandfather. Sergeant Thomas Martinez. He was there. The world tilted again. Michael sank into the chair opposite her, his mind struggling to process this new, impossible piece of information. He was in the Lost Battalion, Lily continued, her voice as steady as if she were reciting a history lesson. He was one of the men your grandfather saved. He never spoke of the war to anyone, except to my mother when she was a little girl. And she told me. He said General Blackwood was the bravest man he ever knew. He said the general made him promise to never tell the real story. He said the secret would keep his family safe. A maid's daughter, a construction worker's granddaughter, and the descendant of a soldier whose life had been saved by his own grandfather 70 years ago in a dark and frozen forest. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a connection, a thread of history and fate that had woven their two families together across decades and social classes, leading to this very moment, in this very room. My grandfather gave yours a gift, Lily said softly. The gift of his silence. In return, your grandfather gave him a gift. the gift of his life. She looked at him, her gaze direct and powerful. Sometimes, the most important debts are the ones that are never spoken of. Michael was speechless. He thought of his grandfather, the stern, distant hero from the photographs. He had always been a legend, a myth. Now he was a man who had made impossible choices, who had carried the weight of a terrible secret. And in that moment, Michael felt a connection to him, a sense of understanding that he had never felt before. He looked at Lily, this extraordinary child who carried the history of her family not as a burden, but as a quiet, simple truth. She had not come to the Blackwood mansion seeking a reward or recognition. She had come and spoken to a lonely old woman, simply because it was the kind thing to do. She had honored the unspoken debt of her family not with a demand for payment, but with an act of grace. The next day, Michael called a family meeting. It was just the four of them in the formal living room. Michael, his mother, Lily, and a pale, tense Isabella. Michael began by telling them what he had learned. He spoke of Operation Winter Pine, of the cover-up, of the quiet heroism of his grandfather, and of Sergeant Thomas Martinez. He looked at his mother, and for the first time, he spoke to her in her own language, his signs still hesitant, but now filled with a new confidence and love. He told her he was proud of his grandfather, not for the medal he had been given, but for the man he had truly been. Then, he turned to Isabella. "Isabella," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "You and I, our arrangement is no longer viable. We want different things from life. I want a life of truth, of connection. I am no longer interested in a partnership based on convenience and social standing." Isabella's face, already pale, turned ashen. "You're ending this? For them?" she said, her voice dripping with venom as she gestured towards Lily and Eleanor. "For a sentimental story about a war that happened a century ago? I'm ending this for me," Michael said simply. "Because I am finally becoming the man my grandfather would have wanted me to be. The man my mother deserves as a son." He stood up. "Arthur will see you out." Isabella, for once in her life, was rendered speechless. She shot a look of pure hatred at Lily, then turned and stormed out of the room and out of their lives. A quiet peace settled in the room after her departure. Eleanor came to Michael and put a hand on his arm, her eyes shining with pride and love. She signed to him, "Your father would be so proud." Then she turned to Lily and embraced her, a long, heartfelt hug that spoke volumes more than words or signs ever could. A single act of kindness can echo through a generation. The debt between Sergeant Martinez and General Blackwood had finally been paid, not with money or accolades, but with the healing of a family, the bridging of a silent chasm. The maid's daughter had come to the billionaire's mansion, not to take, but to give. And in doing so, she had given them back to themselves. The story, however, was far from over. For in unlocking the secrets of the Blackwood family, Lily was one step closer to understanding the extraordinary truth of her own. And that was a truth that would prove to be the most shocking revelation of all. With Isabella's dramatic exit, a palpable sense of peace settled over the Blackwood mansion. It was as if a long, unseen storm had finally passed, leaving behind a clean, quiet stillness. The heavy, oppressive silence that had once defined the home was replaced by something new. It wasn't loud, but it was vibrant. It was the soft rustle of pages turning in the library, the quiet click of chess pieces in the den, and, most importantly, the graceful, silent dance of hands weaving stories in the sunlit solarium. Lily was no longer just a companion or a tutor. She was the heart of this new, healing family. She was the bridge between a son and his mother, between the past and the present. She ate dinner with them every night, her presence a small, steady flame at the vast, polished mahogany table. She taught Michael the nuances of sign language, correcting his grammar with the gentle patience of a seasoned professor. She learned to play chess with Eleanor, a game of silent strategy and shared smiles. Sarah watched this transformation with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Her life had changed beyond recognition. As promised, Michael had given her a salary so generous that she had been able to quit her second job, and even her first, the cleaning service she had worked for since Lily was a baby. Michael had insisted she become the official household manager, a title that came with a beautiful suite of rooms on the third floor and the respect of the entire staff. She had time now. Time to read to her daughter at night, to help her with her schoolwork, to simply be a mother. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. Yet, a small thread of worry remained. She saw the way Michael Blackwood looked at her daughter. It wasn't with anything improper, of course, but with a profound, searching curiosity. He watched Lily as one might watch a comet, a beautiful and inexplicable phenomenon. He was a man who solved puzzles for a living, who understood complex systems and global markets. And Lily was a puzzle he couldn't solve. One Saturday afternoon, Michael found Lily in his father's old study. The room was no longer locked. It had become a place of shared history rather than a sealed tomb. Lily was not reading. She was standing before a large, antique globe, her small finger tracing a path across the faded continents. "Planning a trip?" Michael asked, his voice soft. He signed the words as well, his movements becoming more fluid with each passing day. Lily looked up and smiled. "Not yet. I was just looking at places I've read about." Her finger stopped on a small, insignificant dot in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. "This is Henderson Island," she signed. "It's one of the most remote places in the world. It's uninhabited, but it has the highest density of plastic debris reported anywhere on the globe. Ocean currents carry trash from thousands of miles away, and it all washes up on the beaches there." Michael frowned. "I've never heard of it." "It's a sad place," she continued, her expression somber. "A beautiful place that humans have ruined without ever even setting foot on it. It's a reminder that everything is connected, that you don't have to see the consequences of your actions for them to be real." Michael was silent. He walked over to his desk and pulled out his phone, typing the name of the island into a search engine. The screen filled with articles and images, confirming everything Lily had just said. It was a well-documented ecological disaster, yet it was an obscure piece of knowledge, not something a typical 10-year-old would know or even be interested in. "Where did you read about this, Lily?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. Lily simply shrugged. "A geography journal, I think. At the library." But it wasn't just geography. It was everything. One day, she would be discussing the principles of quantum entanglement with an astonishing clarity. The next, she would be identifying a rare Bach cantata playing softly on the radio. She spoke of historical events not as things she had learned, but as things she almost seemed to remember. The question of how she knew things became a gentle obsession for Michael. He understood the story of her great-grandfather. It was a beautiful, powerful story of connection and fate. But it didn't explain the breadth and depth of her knowledge. It didn't explain the Latin, the advanced physics, the obscure ecological facts. Driven by a need to understand this miracle in his life, he decided to do something that felt like a betrayal, yet necessary. He hired a private investigator, not to spy on Lily, but to understand her history. He wanted to know everything about Sergeant Thomas Martinez and his family. He felt he owed it to Lily, and to his grandfather, to know the full story of the man whose legacy was now so intertwined with his own. The investigator was discreet, a former FBI agent named David Chun who specialized in historical and genealogical research. He was the best in the business. Michael gave him the only information he had. Sergeant Thomas Martinez, served in the U.S. Army during World War II, was part of the Lost Battalion in the Hurtgen Forest. While Chun began his work, life at the mansion continued its peaceful course. The bond between the three of them deepened. Eleanor, with Lily as her voice, began to re-engage with the world. She started hosting small afternoon teas for old friends, the silence filled with the warmth of rekindled connections. Michael, for his part, found himself changing in ways he never thought possible. He started listening more than he talked. He delegated more at work, discovering that the empire he had built could, in fact, survive without his constant, obsessive attention. He was discovering the simple, profound joy of being present. One evening, about a week after he hired the investigator, Michael received a call from David Chun. "Mr. Blackwood." Chin's voice was tight, strained. "We have a problem. A very strange problem." "What is it?" Michael asked, a knot of apprehension tightening in his stomach. "Sergeant Thomas Martinez," Chin said. "He existed. His service record is exactly as the declassified files suggest. He was a hero, twice decorated for bravery before the Hurtgen incident." Chin paused. "But, Mr. Blackwood, Thomas Martinez had no children." The line went silent. Michael felt a wave of dizziness, as if the floor had dropped out from under him. "What? That's impossible. He was Lily's great-grandfather." According to the official record, Chun continued, his voice heavy. He never married. He came home from the war, worked as a carpenter for 40 years, and died in 1988. He was the last of his line. His parents were immigrants, and his only brother was killed at Pearl Harbor. There's no marriage certificate, no birth records, no census data that lists him with a wife or child. By all official accounts, his family line ended with him. There has to be a mistake, Michael insisted, his mind racing. A secret family? An adoption? There had to be a logical explanation. That's what I thought, Chin said. So I dug deeper. I found his military medical records. Sergeant Martinez came home from the war with a severe injury. A piece of shrapnel. The wound saved his life in a firefight, but, Mr. Blackwood, the injury made it physically impossible for him to have children. The words hung in the air, cold, hard, and irrefutable. Michael sank into his chair, the phone feeling like a lead weight in his hand. Lily. Her story. The foundation upon which their new family was built. It was a lie. But how? How could she know the details of the secret mission? Why would she invent such a story? It didn't make sense. Lily wasn't a liar. She was the most honest, pure-hearted person he had ever met. He ended the call, his mind a maelstrom of confusion and a strange, deep-seated sense of betrayal. He walked through the quiet mansion, his footsteps echoing in the grand halls. He found Lily and his mother in the library, sitting by the fire, a book of constellations open between them. They both looked up as he entered, their faces glowing with warmth and affection. His heart twisted. How could he confront them? How could he bring this cold, hard fact into their perfect, peaceful world? He looked at Lily, at her bright, intelligent eyes, her serene smile. A child who knew the secrets of the stars and the hidden corners of history. A child who, according to all available data, should not exist. The puzzle of her existence had just become infinitely more complex. She was not the descendant of a man his grandfather had saved. She was something else. And the truth, he suspected, was going to be more unbelievable, more shocking, and more world-altering than he could ever have prepared for. The maid's daughter had brought light and truth into his home, but she was, herself, the greatest mystery of all. And he was beginning to realize that to solve it, he would have to question the very nature of reality itself. And that's where we'll end the story for now. Whenever I share one of these, I hope it gives you a chance to step out of the everyday and just drift for a bit. I'd love to know what you were doing while listening. Maybe relaxing after work, on a late-night drive, or just winding down. Drop a line in the comments. I really do read them all. And if you want to make sure we cross paths again, hitting like and subscribing makes a huge difference. We are always trying to improve our stories, so feel free to also drop your feedback in the comment section below. Thanks for spending this time with me.